Hey, Strong Girls. I'm Molly Herford, sports journalist, ultra runner, cyclist, and author, and founder of Strong Girl Publishing.
And I'm Dr. Sasha, executive director of Yellow Running Shoes, a researcher, engineer, elite runner, and your BFF who's breaking down the science of smashing barriers in women's sports.
Think of us as the intersection of science and culture for women and girls in sport. Each week, we'll dissect the latest headlines and cutting-edge research on female athletes.
Debunk myths about girls in sport. Talk about how hormones affect performance at every age, to the latest research in sports science around mental performance, nutrition, equipment, and so much more.
And we'll spotlight badass girls and women who are rewriting the rules of the game, sometimes literally.
Expect it to be nerdy.
And occasionally TMI.
But it will always be honest.
Whether you're a strong girl yourself or you're raising one, this show is for you. Welcome to Strong Girl Talk,
where sports science meets sisterhood.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Strong Girl Talk, the international edition. Sasha, how is your morning going?
Well, good morning from Australia. It's a little wet and rainy here. It's been really beautiful. I'm sort of giggling. I'm like actually in a big hooded sweatshirt today because it's a little bit cooler. And by cooler, it's 17. Like winter here is 10. As my stepdaughter said, I've already gone soft. I've been here for 3 days and I've gone soft as it relates to the weather. But I've been walking the beaches. I walked some cliffs. Coffee here is amazing. The active culture here, Molly. Oh my gosh. Like you would just be in heaven. And then the dog culture, there are many little DWs here.
Well, did you see the thing about the dachshund that escaped on like an Australian island and was at large for over 500 days before it was found and eventually reunited with its owners?
I mean, I found out about it because of you.
Yeah, very exciting news for me. I followed it very closely, closer than I follow literally any other sport, any other news story. I was obsessive. Every morning I'd wake up and be like, have they found Valerie yet? Which they did, and it was very exciting.
Valerie's the dog.
Valerie's the dog.
People to be like, it's not like someone lost their child, Valerie. Valerie was the dachshund.
Yeah. Okay, that's amazing. And it is funny. I would say actually a fair number of the clubs that have bought a Shred Girls book for the young girls on their team, weirdly enough, I'd say like half of them have been from Australia. So I completely understand cycling, outdoor sports, like even girls in sport is just huge in Australia. It's so impressive what they're doing.
Well, and so on this trip, I'm hoping to get down to Melbourne, which is where the Matildas are. And so the Matildas are the Australian women's soccer team. And I think it's the first soccer football team, women's soccer football team in the world to have like their own facility and gym and everything. So I'm unfortunately flying out the open practice night. But yeah, I think Australia is really thinking about sport in a really inclusive and accessible way.
For sure. And I mean, as far as like the research goes, even just like shouting out the amount of sports research that comes out of Australia is, again, just staggering given like the size and population of Australia.
Yeah, they do great work. Again, so Australian Institute of Sport is down in Melbourne, but the way that like their spoke network works across the country and how they engage with people from, the identity factors we've talked about, but, really talking about girls and women, also disability, with the Olympics coming here in 2032. So Paralympics coming as well. They have a massive focus on para and disability sport to get everybody moving.
Oh, love that. Love that. And how crazy is it that 2032 is actually not that far away? I was about to be like, oh, wow, like they're starting already. And nope.
Yeah. Well, and especially, right, Kelly Brush Foundation, right? Like you had a great conversation with Kelly talking about the access to equipment. And so if you really want to, by the time the Paralympics comes here and the Olympics come here, have access and equipment for everybody, and they've been planning for at least 5 years at this point. I actually got to connect with the two leading researchers at the Olympic Studies Conference this summer, and just to hear the great work that they're doing to make that equipment accessible for all Australians it's a great model that I think everybody's got to follow.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, definitely that conversation got my brain really spinning. As Shred Girls book 4, Lindsay and the Curse of Gemini Lakes is out in just under 2 weeks. When this episode comes out, I'm already thinking about book 5, obviously. And
I love that.
I think there's going to have to be a hand cycle in it is really where I'm leaning. Because I think that representation is really important. So,
absolutely.
very excited for that. All right.
Are you going to sign my book? I am before
Obviously.
we.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
of
great.
course. Yeah. That's why I write
Yeah,
books.
yeah. Like I'm just gonna have my fangirl moment with you here. Could you please sign my book?
Yeah, it's the best part of writing books is getting to sign them. Yeah. So speaking of fan moments, like let's talk about the fact that this new research came out just saying 3 in 10 American adults follow women's sports. Now, for the listener who's listening to a podcast about girls and women in sport, that might seem really low, but bearing in mind that I believe it's like 6 in 10 that follow sports, period. Um, 3 in 10 is actually huge. Like I saw that and I was so excited. Like it shows there's still room to grow, but holy moly, are we growing?
Oh, exactly. I was like, oh, I'm gonna think about this mathematically, about the exponential growth and like where it goes from here. As you're like laughing, of course, you think about it in math, Sasha. But yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing this, the growth in the US. I think, the US really drives change when it comes to the media. And so it's so awesome to see this growth. I think, with I think we're going to see more growth in youth sport, which then drives more watching of professional sport. Same way with professional sport, it's going to drive more youth to participate. Like, I think this is only going to get bigger. And I can't help but wonder if, in 5 years we're chatting and it's like 7 in 10 US adults watch women's sport and the rest of it is like 5 or 6 in 10 watch men's sport.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. I'm like very excited to see when, yeah, the following women's sport number actually goes over the following sport in general number. And I
Yeah.
genuinely believe that that will be a thing that happens. Just because I mean we've seen like the women's sports, I would say the fan base tends to be so much more passionate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so those are the people that like probably don't like out of that 3 in 10, let's say there's probably a percentage of them that only watch women's sports, like don't watch men's
Mm-hmm.
sports at all. So if all of the people that are watching like sports in general start watching some women's sports, there's still going to be a population that will only watch women's sports. So therefore, this is how we get them. Everyone watches sports, and then some people also watch just women's sports.
Well, and I think about the growth. I was on that World Athletics call about equipment. It was like footwear, but what McKinsey really talked about was the biggest opportunity is those that don't participate in sport. And I think given the way the fan base is growing in women's sport, like that untapped market one is hello, everybody, pay attention. That is the most like powerful market that you can tap into. But I just think they're going to think differently about how they approach sport. And I think given the accessibility of women's sport and the storytelling, way more people are going to lean into that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, the numbers are bearing out financially as well. I just saw this article that Kai Cunningham, who's this big VC guy, says something very, quote, something very special is happening in women's sports. And he really sees like WNBA teams in particular as like the next spot for people to be investing and putting money in. And I think he's completely right. I think at some point pretty soon, WNBA teams are actually going to get too expensive to be bought or sponsored. And then the nice thing with that is then we're going to move to the next sport. I think FIFA
Mm-hmm.
coming to the like FIFA being in the US, even if it's not the women's stuff, I think that's going to really cause momentum for soccer for American companies, North American companies. Yeah, I think the money's coming slowly to women's sport, but it's coming.
Well, and for them, right, it's about sponsoring the team and then the offshoots, right? So running and football, soccer compete with like who has the most participation globally. So we'll just call them equal, right? They're the two most participated sports globally. And fine, it goes back and forth. But there's then real opportunities for equipment. But then you can start to think about all the other training, right? And so if you really want to be a great athlete, right, like how do you get into volleyball and ringette, hockey? And so I think to your point, it really starts this like down trickle of like bolstering sport overall, right? And the best thing fans can do is go spend money on things. So how do you link in with those sports? So yeah, appreciate that thought.
Love it. Love it. Speaking of soccer, speaking of FIFA, Women's World Cup is expanding from 38 or 32 to 48 teams for 2031, which is the same as the men's competition. Again, exponential, right? Like when we talk about
Yeah.
like the start of women's soccer, and now we're already only a couple years away from actual equal number of teams in a sport. That's huge.
It's huge. And I think what's really interesting is like 16 wasn't that long ago, right? And then what I really loved about the FIFA announcement the other week was the Afghan women's soccer team, right? Like we've seen so much political turmoil. You know, there's this like bifurcation in the Middle East right now. It's like support all people or closed borders, very conservative thinking. And Afghanistan, unfortunately, has gone, I don't want to use the word backwards, but they've reverted to very traditional views where women forget playing sport. Women basically have no place in society. And FIFA
Hmm.
just stepped up and was like, there's this team. We will ensure that they get to participate. And, we want to do everything that we can to support them. And I think about the like globalist humanity lens and I'm like, thank you, right? Just thank you.
Coming back to sport as a human right. Yep. We're
And
always
it's
going to go there.
Well, and so actually, here's one of the things I've been thinking about, sort of on the way over. So this is okay, a little bit weird tangential thought. There's a new pope, and the new pope was talking about, we need peace in the Ukraine, right? The invasion that Russia, like that's 2.5 years ago now, right? Peace in Palestine and peace in Israel, and this banning of those countries at the Olympics, I actually think is a mistake. Thinking about it through the human rights lens. So thank
Ooh.
you for making me think differently about this. If sport is really a place to unite us all, then I think we need to welcome those countries in. And I think like with big open arms, show that like the world can get along. And I can't help but wonder if, Kirsty Coventry, like we talk about women being at the table, does she think about it differently? And do we think about conflict in a different way and show that sport can unite us and bring us peace? And so, I'd really love to see those countries included back in and us to think differently about how we think about those things moving forward.
For sure, yeah. And I mean, you're right. Like, how many athletes are really like losing out because of that? And,
Right.
how harmful is that to like the, further generations of athletes in those countries? And, in a lot of ways, like those countries are already like going through a time. Like,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
like the kids, the young people, like, so yeah, no, I think you're completely right. I think there's probably like some safeguards you could put around it to really like point out like we are not happy with this country's behavior, but like we're not banning the athletes.
And
Um,
sport is a vehicle for peace, right?
exactly.
Like, and frame it in a way that brings people together. I think the current framing makes it too divisive again. And I'm like, wait, hold up. If we're really saying sport is about uniting people, then hey, don't do that. No.
Yeah, reuniting everyone except these people. Yeah.
It makes me think of Austin Powers. Okay, the one thing that's not on this list that we have to talk about because Voss's boss ended up on the podium, and I just need you to like know that I was like, hey, celebrating her, but just how happy you are when you talk about Marianne Voss. So like, I just, anyways,
I
yeah.
just honestly like talk about my like ultimate dream podcast guest. If we ever get her, I think I'll just need like a fainting couch next to me the whole time. I have interviewed her
I'll hold your
before, and it
hand.
was like
I'll hold your
honestly,
hand.
it was the greatest like moment of my life. I think it was like 2013 at Sea Otter. I got to interview her for like 4 minutes, I think. And it was I was so starstruck. It's the only time I've interviewed someone where I've been that star. And like I've interviewed Sven Nys, I've interviewed Vanderpool,
Right.
like all of those guys. But Voss is the only one that ever just I was like, oh my God, I love you so much. Everything, everything. Yeah, very excited to see her still in the mix. And please come on our podcast. Um,
Okay, but okay, so La Vuelta Femenina wrapped up. It was, I think, 8 days, a Sunday to Saturday event. Demi Vollering ended up on top. She also won the Queen of the Mountains. Yeah.
yeah.
Anna Van Bregen was the most combative, which just I was like, yeah, you were. Like you came out of the car and you are back on your bike and you are crushing it and like making it spicy and exciting.
Side note on most combative, Collingwood finally had a viewing of Breakaway Femmes. I
Oh
finally
yeah.
saw it on Monday. Fantastic. Highly recommend to anyone. Yeah, just great movie. Very exciting. So glad to get, yeah, the women who raced the Tour de France in the 80s really deserve way more kudos and cred than they have ever gotten. So I loved it.
Okay. So aside from me telling you that there was a Tour de France in the 80s because I went to the movie first, I'm like hearing about the movie. Did you know that before? Because I sure didn't.
I did, but only because I consider Catherine Bertine to be like a friend, and I've talked to her and
Oh,
interviewed her and read
okay.
her stuff and all of that. So we go back.
All right.
But even then, like I would say my knowledge of it was very limited compared to what I know about, obviously like the course and like the last 10 years of Tour de France and the women's
Yeah.
fight there. So yeah, super good movie. I will say my only gripe with it was I felt like in order, I wish like the conflict in that movie is very clear to me. Like the conflict is that the Tour de like society did not want the Tour de France
Yeah.
like women to have a race. But instead,
Yeah.
they actually spent a lot of time that I disliked focusing on some of the like interpersonal relationships between the riders. At one
Totally.
point, one of the women called the other woman a bitch, like, and it's funny. It got laughs. But
Yeah.
they even had one of the women saying like, "Oh, you know, when like women are on a team, like we're not like the guys where we race and then we're all friends again. It's like much more like catty than that." And I was like, "This is really not painting women."
Also, the men's team is worse, like just
Yeah,
in terms of
yeah.
cattiness.
Number one, have they checked with the men's team? Like,
Yeah, like, hey, hold up. No, no chance. You want to talk about egos? Okay. Those little buses and those male egos, no world is it not catty.
yeah, so I felt like they really needed like Catherine actually comes in and is like kind of crediting Jenny Longo, saying like if she had been a man, everyone would have been like she's an aggressive racer, but it's great,
Yeah.
like blah blah blah. So I was glad they included her saying that, but I also just kind of was like, why did we need to include like two different sections where we just had all of the women kind of like talk crap on the other women. And I didn't love that because I feel like clearly these women are standing up to a much broader, bigger problem that, you know, maybe they didn't have as good quotes for. Um, but I just felt like I didn't love that part, to be honest.
Oh, wholeheartedly agree. And it's like, why do we see kill like so we if we perpetuate these stereotypes and we keep talking about it this way, like, is it really going to change? And the answer is one, it happens on both sides, and two, it's changed. What hasn't changed is like overcoming some of these like powerful international federations like the UCI and the ASO to really include women and to take us seriously, right? Like take us seriously. Like La Vuelta Femenina, phenomenal. So looking forward to the Tour de France. Tour de France Femme avec Swift. Say it
Good
properly,
job. Good
Sasha.
job.
Yeah, right. And like from the 1 day races, the monuments this spring. Like again, everybody watches women's sports. Why? Because it's awesome.
Yeah. So I just felt like they could have gone after more interviews with, you know, the UCI people that said they couldn't have the race that long and like all
Yeah,
of that. Like I just felt like there could have been more digging on that side and I just didn't love that light to paint the women in. But otherwise, I mean, beautiful movie, highly recommend. Like really do
yeah.
think it's an important one to see.
I ate
Uh
a whole bag of large. I ate a large bag of popcorn when I went and saw it.
oh
You?
my God, me too. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
No
And I don't
problem.
share.
No, no, Peter tried. I brought my husband.
Yeah.
He kept trying to like go in, and I literally was like slapping his hand. He got the top layer, and I was furious. I was like, that is the
Oh yeah, it's got the most
best
butter.
part, the most butter. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I was so
yeah,
angry.
yeah. Okay, we got to talk about track. So Misha, okay, so we got to track relays. I got to see part of it. I did definitely like did not watch as many sports this weekend. I also slept 13 and a half hours on a 14-hour or on a 15-hour flight. Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy beside me was like, "What? That was you actually looked peaceful." So I didn't watch a ton of sports this weekend. I did get up and watch World Relays on Saturday before we left. I actually missed the 4x1 mixed relay to start, but in the final when I was probably in the air. Time is a little bit strange right now. Canada's mixed 4x1 team won, which I think was like a surprise, not just to Canada, but like for sure to the entire world. I
For
loved
sure.
how they celebrated it. Misha ran in the 4x4 women's mixed. I can't remember. Sorry,
She
brain.
ran in the 4x4 women's final. She didn't run in the semi, she ran just in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell you it was the most terrifying like 4 minutes of my life or 5 minutes of my life because there was a false start and
Oh shit!
she was running first. And the camera after the start, like after they called the false start, the cameras were on her.
Oh no! Oh my gosh!
And
Oh my
for
gosh!
60 seconds, I had to watch her face as she tries to like maintain her cool. And they're like clearly checking, like, I don't know if they like
Mm-hmm.
thought Canada messed up. Eventually, they called it as like good. Everyone got to start. It was fine. But I guess her timing thing had gotten messed up. So everyone else's light was green and Canada was
Oh,
red. And it's showing just like zoomed in on her. And when I tell you, I'm so proud of her, just like composure in that moment and ability to then get back in the blocks and actually go out and, do a like perfectly solid lap. Like
Oh,
just incredible. So the team ended up
oh,
finishing seventh, but I mean, that's fantastic for world championships. So yeah,
qualified
really,
for world. Well, so that's
and
fantastic for
qualified for
world relay
worlds. Yes.
champions. Yeah, I was like, here, it gets confusing
It's,
here.
oh my God,
So
it's so confusing.
So what you wouldn't have seen is standing on the track, you can hear all of the chatter of the officials, right? So Misha's going to be able to hear what they're saying and what they're talking about. So there is a accelerometer in the baton, and there's also an RFID tag, and so it's really cool because you can see like all your splits in live time. And there's force plates in the blocks now. And so, anyways, and the camera, like what size those cameras are huge, and there would have been two people so close to her. And so what we see on TV and her holding her composure is one thing. Understanding the background, having been there, it is the most terrifying thing. So, okay, did not know that. That makes that even more impressive. Wow.
Yeah.
Go,
Yeah.
Misha. Thanks for being a great role model.
Seriously. Holy moly. Yes. And then the other thing as far as like track goes is just some new lists on like who's going to everyone, we're now finding out who's going to world championships in a couple months here. So those lists are coming out. And one thing I noticed just looking at the list for I think it was the 10,000 and the marathon, I could be totally
Yeah.
anyway, it was a list
And
of
race
like
walk.
yes, and race walk. It was a list of 8 athletes. And as I was like just scanning the table, the thing I noticed was that all of their coaches listed are men. And I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to flag it because I think it's a really good reminder that we still have a really long way to go when it comes to bringing in women coaching at that very high level. And I think, the federations can be doing a lot with that. I think, hopefully up and coming athletes, we're going to see more and more because I think, we are getting more women coaches. So like hopefully as they're coaching younger athletes and the younger
Hi,
athletes are
I'm
on the
here.
rise, I was going to say, hi, Sasha. I think we're going to see more of it, but I would like to see more now.
Well, and so actually, I'm going to celebrate World Athletics here. I don't know if I sent you this announcement, but World Athletics is pushing down on the federations to that exact point,
Love it.
right? So, yeah, like, hey, and I think the timeline is short, like 2027, we expect you to have at least 40% coaches female. We will support the officials, the referees, the technical delegates. Like, we will do that background work, and we want to get to 50-50, I think, by 2030. So, Seb Coe and his team really have this vision for gender equity, and having been interviewed by them and some other things, like they really do believe in it. And, I've talked to Athletics Canada and been like, hey, I've got my advanced coaching diploma, which is a requirement. And, it comes down to, well, hey, you've never coached at an elite level. And I'm like, well, I've coached at an elite level in alpine skiing. This young woman went to the Olympics that I worked with, and I've kind of like, it's
But
just
also,
bizarre. And
side
I think,
note, if you were never presented with the opportunity to coach at a high level,
how?
how are you supposed to
Yeah.
coach at a high level? That's like
Yeah.
you need job experience to get the job that would give you the job experience.
So yeah, so the system's a little bit broken. I mean, I love coaching youth. Like I just find it so rewarding. If I could, and I, had a salary to do it, by all means, I would do way more of it. I'm working with Sawyer Nicholson. It brings me just the ultimate amount of joy connecting with her and seeing her thrive and have so much fun.
Hmm.
Um,
I
but
do think
actually,
this is
sorry.
I was gonna say, I do think this is like the I hesitate to say the word problem because don't get me wrong, I do not think it's a problem. But I will say I think women gravitate toward youth coaching partially because
Totally.
women are nurturers. We've been brought up to be like teachers. There's a reason like that profession tends to be mostly women. So I do think we end up gravitating towards these like youth coach positions that then end up, you know, they're really rewarding. They're fantastic, but they also kind of then keep us out of the high level stuff. Um,
It's a good point. It's interesting because it was more in alpine skiing that I coached at the youth level, and it was mostly so I could ski as much as I could on weekends, right? And so I think
ah,
it's very different. So I think I need to shift my mindset. And it's interesting. I've had a few women reach out to be like, "Hey, I'd love if we could work together." So maybe that's my thing. So Run Little Wing, which was like the Wazelle women's group back in the day, like I'd love to have a group that met like in the mornings. I'd be there most of the time. Professional, semi-professional, women. Anyways, goals, Molly. I got goals.
we've got big plans, big plans.
I've got big
Um,
plans.
all right, and last little news blurb, and we won't get into this too much, but so up in Canada, we have Safe Sport. They have a new campaign out called Good Vibes Only. Now, first, I want to just applaud the campaign and the point of the campaign, which is to make safe sport just more approachable, give athletes more resources, give coaches more resources, bring it about. What I dislike, and we've talked about this in the debrief episode, is the language.
Yeah.
I do not like the idea of the campaign being called Good Vibes Only. Um, because I think it makes kind of a joke out of the concept of safe sport. Um, this is not about vibes, right? Like yes, vibes are a good like check of like, are you comfortable or not? But we are not existing on vibes alone. So I just feel like I can see a lot of people making jokes about this in a way that really takes away from the work that Safe Sport is doing, the, mission that they actually have, which is a great mission.
Yeah, and I see it from a whole host. The vibes I get, like I don't know that it was the right word. I love that they're taking a proactive approach though. So I've done the volleyball Canada, athletics Canada, aquatics Canada, like youth training, and just bluntly, I felt yelled at. Like there was no engagement for me to be like, oh, this is helpful for me. So I haven't looked at this. I did. Kellyanne Paul, who is the CEO and executive director of the Canada Games Council, was my mentor this year. What a privilege to connect with that human. And, they're really thinking about it through a social justice and Indigenous ways of knowing and doing. And so I wonder if it's just like we have a bad PR statement out, because I think it really is intended to think about conflict resolution instead of in a hierarchy, right? Like in a way that involves everybody so that everybody can learn from it. So while I'm not a fan of Good Vibes Only, because all I think about is a coffee cup and a New York library, I don't know what yours is, but you are like, yeah.
It's a
But also,
little too like, let's try to reach Gen Alpha for my
well,
taste, which they're
oh
trying
my
to do,
God,
and that's fair.
but maybe that's not their language. Like that's my language as a 43-year-old woman drinking a coffee in the New York City library, because that's where it is. And that was so maybe the language was missed, right? I go back to the community sport leaders, and all they kept saying to me was, listen to the youth, listen to the youth. So more research should be done on my part to understand if they listen to the youth in this part. But just celebrating the proactive approach as opposed to don't do that. I slap my hand. That's
Absolutely.
what.
Yes. Good vibes on the overall on the overall campaign, but maybe consult some marketing people next time for your titles. Um, or ask us. Okay, so
You
today,
ask you. I'm the
ask,
engineer and mathematician. I'll send you to Molly.
perfect, done. Okay, so we were talking about doing an episode today talking about athlete load and how people can think about this. I love this because I think, especially youth sport, we really need to be thinking about this for our
Yeah.
kids. I mean, obviously, like as adults, if you're just a woman listening to this podcast because you love women's sport and you're a woman athlete or you're anyone really, this is something to be thinking about. But talk to me about, we're talking about athlete load. You're the engineer here. Give me the definition of what metrics we're talking about when we talk about it.
What I talk about when I talk about athlete load, like the
Yes.
Murakami book. So I'm actually going to put my advanced coaching diploma hat on right now, and it's the performance planning section. And in this section, and I'm like this well, you and Peter talk about this for sure all the time on the Consummate Athlete podcast. But this idea of like you can vary two things, right? You can vary frequency or you can vary intensity. And so frequency, because yes, it's also like a wave that like moves through the world. But frequency, really, in the context of this, is thinking about the amount of time you do a workout. So in running or biking or swimming, similar sports, we probably think about it in minutes or distance. And we probably have to think about those two things in terms of frequency together at times, which can give us some input as to how the intensity is. And so, intensity, kind of how it is like the more intense it is, the higher the load's going to be. I'd love, Molly, from your perspective, to know what you and Peter have talked about as it relates to this.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time. Because obviously, especially from an endurance lens, I'm super curious how you think about this when we're talking about more, like team sports, how you think about it, because I think that makes everything way more tricky. It's much easier when you're talking about like just endurance running, just cycling. So yeah, we talk all the time about, frequency throughout the week. Frequency actually is kind of our watchword when it comes to, a lot of endurance athletes, especially those who are, out of college. We're thinking more like the weekend, quote unquote, weekend warrior types, where, they'll go out and slam like an 8 hour ride on Saturday, a 4 hour ride on Sunday, and then not ride the rest of the week because they're exhausted from their weekend rides. Um, we're not big fans of that. We're much bigger fans of frequency. So riding more often, not necessarily for, ridiculous hours. But as you say, like varying it. And then
Hmm.
obviously intensity, the big mistake new athletes tend to make is the go hard all the time. And I think kids make this mistake just naturally. Um, I remember my youth, what the couple of times I tried exercising, it was like 0 to 11. Right? Like I, sprint down the block because I was like, I'm gonna be a runner now. And then I'd just be like, 15 seconds in, and be like, this is impossible. I can't run. And
Well,
just
that's
I
a
was out.
horrible way to approach it because your whole body would be like, I'm out of
Yeah.
energy. I'm out of energy. I've run so hard.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But no one really explained that to me. And I think the natural default on kids is 0 to 11, right? Like
yeah,
we turn it up.
yeah. So the team sport thing I actually think is really interesting, right? So like I actually, when you said that, I was like, oh, basketball is a way better way to do that, right? Because the sprint is shorter and you would be going up and down the court. The challenge is the skill. And so in terms of, oh my gosh, so we were talking about Metrolinx while I've been here in Australia. I stepped out. I was like, hey, have they opened up that subway? And you're like, where is this going? And I was like, no, they've not opened up the Eglinton subway. But in 2005, they asked me, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that Toronto is going to face, which is where the subway is? And I said, over programming of kids. And people at that point were like, what are you talking about? And I guess I had this foresight to say that like youth sport will grow and kids are going to be participating in a ton of sport. And so if your kid goes from after school programming where they're playing in the playground to soccer. Again, we talked about that already today, which is like one of the largest sports. And then potentially go. So my nephew plays soccer, baseball, and one other thing on Saturdays, tennis, right? So he goes to three different sports. And so that frequency, while the intensity might be really low, really high load on a kid. The one thing pre puberty, which is just like, take me back, is the ability to recover is unbelievable. And so that is on their side. Again, only pre puberty. For boys, it actually diminishes a little bit too compared to like pre puberty, post puberty, but their hit of testosterone is much bigger than girls. So girls pre puberty can actually do way more than we think that they can do. And I think that, like there's so many research studies about like, well, we underappreciate what girls can do and we don't let them do as much because we think boys are bigger, faster, stronger. Pre-puberty, same. Yeah.
Interesting. And I think that
Yeah,
also speaks to the dropout rate of girls at puberty,
totally.
because when you go from being, fast and able to recover and really comfortable and stuff to suddenly like a stop sign, it's just like boom, red light.
And exhausted.
It's
You would be exhausted, right? That's the part I think that's actually missing in the conversation is that you can probably keep doing what you're doing, but you're exhausted. And so you have to let those girls sleep way more and eat a lot of protein and carbohydrates. And then don't forget the
yes.
fat because you need all of that to like actually process it. Stevie Lynn, I love you, Stevie Lynn.
100%. Yep. It's funny. We just released the cover for Power Up, her young women's sport nutrition book coming out with us in the fall. And I'm so excited about it. I was actually just working through the chapter on fat today and just like, yeah, the importance of that for your brain. Cause like we talk about carbs, we talk about protein in the sport world
Yes.
all the time, but the way that fat is utilized to, as like literal brain food, and
Yes.
yeah, like hormones don't work if there's not enough fat in the diet. And I think for an athlete doing 2 a day practices, that's actually very easy to have that kind of go awry because you're trying to avoid a lot of fatty stuff because it doesn't sit great in your gut when you're training. So for youth athletes who
Mm.
have 4 a.m. practice or like 7 p.m. practice, you can see where,
Train your gut, but train your gut, right? Like I was able to train my gut so that I could. Jen Saigo, great sports dietitian who worked with Athletics Canada for years, was like, train your gut to eat high fat yogurt. And I could eat it, like not a huge serving, like three-quarters of a serving, 30 minutes before a run. And so all of a sudden, not only did you have access to the carbohydrates that you would put in your gut, but then you could actually like oxidize and use them and think. You could think so that you didn't get hit by a car at the end of your run either.
very
Key,
important.
key.
Yes. Yeah, Stevie has
So,
convinced me to shift to 2% Greek yogurt instead of the
oh,
non-fat. And it wasn't that I was doing non-fat for any reason other than like it has a couple extra grams of protein in it per serving, just from how the serving shakes out. But now I just use 2% and use a little bit more, and it's great.
right.
Tastes way better.
I'm a 5%er. Yeah, it's true.
I find it really hard to find the 5% at our
Oh
grocery
gosh.
store is my issue.
It used to be way easier, totally. So yes, agreed. Like that is like our staple is to get 5%, but that's been much more challenging to get. But I drink a lot of 2% milk, um, lots of meats, lots of fishes. I am allergic to legumes, which is why I don't eat them. They're high in protein. They don't have a ton of fat in them. Olive oil. I am a big fan of really good olive oil. We actually buy, so we rent a tree, right? And you have that. But then we just buy the metal container from the grocery store and like fill up glass bottles over and over again because it's a much more affordable way, right? Like olive oil is not inexpensive. And so like if you're thinking about your kids, like, but those are the kind of fats that you want to be feeding your kids, right? And so
Yes.
like, right, like when you make scrambled eggs for them in the morning, like make them in olive oil. Why? Because then you're just like adding to it and like you can trick them, right? Let your kids put the ketchup on. I do not like ketchup myself, which is a side, but like that little bit of sugar, that 17, kcals of sugar that they're going to get from the ketchup and the eggs, like just do it. Like, anyways, back to training load. But those are the things, right? That like you can sort of have these higher training loads as long as you're like fueling them.
Yeah, which is
Wearables and kids.
it's hard. Yeah.
Sorry, go
Oh,
ahead. It's
which is
really
just
hard.
it's so hard to do. Yeah. Okay, wearables and kids, which is really where we wanted to come with this conversation because I
Yeah.
think, lately it's funny. I feel like Whoop had its moment in the sun a couple of years ago, a few years ago with athletes. It was huge, it was everywhere. It's still kind of everywhere. Now,
Yeah.
I would say Aura rings are actually having a huge moment with athletes. And now a lot of the watches, like just, your
Yep.
kind of generic GPS run watches, smart watches, any smartwatch basically, is now kind of a wearable that's tracking your sleep, your HRV, you know, all of these little random metrics. And if you're using it, um, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but if you are using it, I do really worry. And the thing that I see the most, the thing that I talk to experts about the most, is that people are losing track of how they feel and basing how they
Yes.
feel entirely on like the number of the wearable or like the smiley face or the frowny face that the wearable is giving them.
Oh my God, my watch right now is telling me like you're detraining. Like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm recovering from surgery watch. Like I need, and you can't tell it that. So
Garmin has
I
never
actually
once told me I wasn't detraining. I was literally running 100 miler and it was like, way to suck.
yeah.
So
Oh my gosh, Rawls, after Leadville, Rawls Garmin told him like, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" And he was like, "I just did Leadville. There's not. I'm exhausted, but like I'm not detraining." So I think that's a good point. So where it comes with kids, I think the big challenge, and you nailed it so well, is we lose that ability to have feel, and feel is the most important thing. So I wore an Aura ring for years until I lost my charger, and in the end, I didn't really need it anymore. But I wore it for cycle tracking. So Aura does your temperature, and temperature is a great way for cycle tracking. And so if you're having challenges with your menstrual cycle and periods, really recommend the Aura ring. I'd love to be able to say to them like, hey, can you make this a little bit more affordable for youth athletes, like females in particular, so that they can have a really like strong relationship with their menstrual cycle. But they don't capture the mental and the cognitive, right? And so like, listen, my Aura sleep, like I am a great sleeper. Part of it is that I just don't move, right? And I'm just generally a great sleeper. And I would get like really high sleep scores. I have a friend, Chris. Actually, Chris is the guy behind Nobody Asked Us. He moves a lot. And his sleep scores would be terrible. And that cognitive load of am I sleeping terribly was way worse for him than actually just I'm a sleeper that moves, right? And because he is an anomaly, and kids are, I think this is what the research said, kids move a lot in their sleep, right? Like they're growing, like their muscles are doing different things. And so that score is probably going to be really inaccurate. And it's also, we don't want kids relying on that kind of data. We want them relying on like, hey, how you feeling today? But like in that critical thinking and reflective way of like, let's talk about that. And so let's frame that in questions that like make sense so that eventually you can get to, hey, how are you feeling today? And they can actually have a dialogue with you with a generic question.
for sure. And I mean, I think you can speak to that. Like, I think actually a lot of the wearables probably. any kid using it, even teens, probably even have to lie about their age on it because I think a lot of them wouldn't
Probably.
even have like under 18 as an, or maybe even under 16, whatever, as an option. I'd have
Hmm.
to look at this, but I think that would be because as you're talking, I'm realizing like there's just probably not enough research about kids' HRV and kids' sleep that like would be in the wearable app that could really
Totally.
be like part of that, the like, thumbs up or thumbs down or like winky face or whatever eggplant emoji it's giving you for the day. I don't know. Don't know what app I'm using.
You get an eggplant? I'm not even going there. Um, yeah. And but also like the best thing that you can do for a kid is give them like I loved my Timex watch growing up, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
you know, start, stop. And I think actually even for adults, right? Molly, like when I used to have multiple watches when I worked out, right? Like I would get to the track and what did I want? I wanted something in my start, stop, so I could see what my interval was, right? Like particularly for the longer ones when I was running on the track, like just to make sure you're splitting correctly. Shorter intervals, I was like, I don't need a watch. Like if I'm doing an all out 200, my coach can call the split. And it's not about time at that point. At the end of the workout, when you're trying to just go hard, it's about like how hard can you go so that when you are finished, you have to lie down.
Yep.
Lying
Yep.
down, success.
Yeah. No, I am admittedly the most lo-fi athlete because
I love it.
I think part of that's like just not growing up with any of that being kind of like given to me, but also I've never been a very easily coached athlete only because of my like technical like just distaste. Um, so I now have an Excel spreadsheet that my coach and I drop in basically eggplant emojis. Like that's the level of like data I'm giving him. I do
But
I do upload everything to Training Peaks though. So I will say if you're a parent, the best thing you can do for your kid if they're in like any endurance sport would be have their watch auto upload to Training Peaks because that way they will then have years of training data that they've never even had to touch. You can get a free account, you can just do it really easily. They'll never have to look at it. They don't need to do any of the like calculations or anything, but it's there. So if they do start, increasing their level of sport and like want to work with a coach, they will have this backdrop of data to go with.
well, and the only thing I was going to say that particularly the reason you need to have that spread, you and your coach don't live in the same country, let alone city. And so
Exactly.
you need that type of engagement so that they can have an understanding of like your fatigue levels. The best thing with youth, particularly coaching youth is you really need to see them eyes on, right? Like I remember even, there would be days often it was like, hey, give your arm a try and see how you're at. I think there was one workout ever. I showed up at U of T and Ross looked at me and went, no, don't, please. You're just turn around and go home. I was like, you made me come all the way here. He was like, I just needed eyes on you to see. He's like, you are like, you're exhausted. And you have to have a coach that you trust so that when those moments happen that you're like, yeah, and then you bounce back, right? Like, and then I had you talked about 0 to 11. It's like go big or go home. Actually, it's if you go big, you're likely to go home for months, right? Like that's been
Yes.
right. Like, and that's what's served me through this, recovery and my surgery, right? Like if I go big at any point, I right, one, it could be over forever, but two, I won't actually get back to doing the things that I want as fast as I want, right? Like it is counterintuitive to the way that we've been trained in our thinking, but it's
Mhm.
actually the fastest way to get back to what you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, geez, like talking about, comeback from injury, right? Like your watch has no idea how
Oh,
your knee feels. Like my watch had
none,
no idea how
zero.
my ankle felt last summer, right? Like,
Right.
and even that was like a bit of a battle with my coach because I would say like it still doesn't feel right. And he'd be like, "Well, you can
Right.
try running." And I'm like, "No,
No,
I can't." And I won't. And I'm so glad I didn't because now I am back. Um, and
before,
that's
okay,
hard.
you just brought up, well, strength training. You brought up soreness, right? So one of the things the watches are absolutely terrible at is tracking the intensity of a weightlifting workout, right? Like I remember doing weight workouts where I was like crushingly sore. One, I got a one. I got a total score of one.
Yeah.
It can't do that yet, right? It doesn't understand the mental load of that. It doesn't understand the mental or the muscle fatigue, the muscle engagement. And so, and those weight workouts, I think the Strava, and I'm sorry, Strava, to pick on you. Um, I think that weekly training load has really like discredited and taken away for how important those circuits and strength training things are. And a friend of mine in Sweden is doing some really cool research that is going to tell us that girls more than boys need to be doing circuits and strength training through puberty. But because of the like Strava mileage game, we get away from that because it doesn't tell us what we want it to tell us, when really what we need it to tell us is I have a rigorous, robust, built body.
Yes. So I think that's all coming back to, the main topic here, athlete load. When we talk about
Yeah.
athlete load, we are not just talking about the exact sport that they're playing, right? Like we're talking about everything that goes into that. So that is the strength training, that is the mobility work. Like, to even broadening it out, it is the sleep, the food, the like mental load from like school or a fight with mom and dad,
Yes.
fight with the best friend, all of that stuff is still a load on the athlete. So technically speaking, it is athlete
Yes.
load. It's not just this like and all of the apps try to boil it down to like one metric, right? Like all of them. Training Peaks has TSS, Strava has this weekly thing. All of the wearables have some kind of different score they're giving you, but none of it can bring in all of those factors
Oh,
yet.
wholeheartedly agree. And I don't think for a while, right? Like even the sleep trackers, right? Like you have to, I'm like pointing to my head, you have to wear this band to like really measure like the brain waves and what's happening. Like we're not, and I don't know that we'll ever be there with something on our watch. You can't measure brain waves with something on your wrist. You can measure brain waves with something on your brain. So that's such an important point.
Yeah, no, I did an article for Canadian Running a couple years ago, or Canadian Cycling, one of them, where I talked about like I was doing a whole thing on wearables, and I ended up with like a like arm just like covered because I had like an Aura, a Whoop, my watch, I had a sweat patch, a patch that was supposed to track my cycle, I had a CGM. It was the most robot. I was miserable. I think I lasted like 2 days on all of them before I like was ripping the patches off. And I think some of the tech is cool. It was just overload. Like it was instantaneous
Yes.
overload. And I am an adult
Yeah.
who is like pretty smart, I'm gonna say, and capable of like seeing those things and having an understanding that like, my blood glucose in one moment does not indicate who I am as a person. But as a 15-year-old getting any of those metrics thrown at you, just think about that like mental, like if we're just adding to the mental load while we're
Yeah.
trying to quantify athlete load.
Totally. And actually, the one other thing I just want to add to athlete load is social media, right? And
Oof.
so, right, like talking about that cognitive overload is, you know, just do a test with yourself, right? Scroll social media in a really negative comparison way and go do a run. And then don't scroll social media or scroll it in a way like when I go on social media, oh my gosh, I am so excited to like see what you've posted, see all the work. Like there are moments where like I get sucked into comparison, but I'm actually really good at noticing that and turning it off, right? But like this, I don't have the bandwidth to like manage that load, right? How do you develop that self-awareness and helping your child and helping yourself to do that? Have those conversations out loud, but really thinking about how do you, if you have a really important workout or if you have a really important game, right? Even if like your really important game could be the intramural lunchtime volleyball game.
For
We're
sure.
not here to judge what is important to you, but you want to show up as the best version of yourself. And so you've got to have that ability to like figure out what you need, like how you manage that load so you can come in to be that best version of yourself. And then as a parent, help your child like discover that for themselves. Like, we're both writers, okay? So I'm throwing it out here. The Kipchoge said it, right? The brain body connection with writing stuff down. Get them a journal. The best thing you can do is get them a journal. I'll put some like prompts in the show notes that people can use, right? Like talk about how your body felt, your brain felt. What did you do before? How did you sleep the night before? You know, did you feel fueled? I don't need to know what you're eating. Do not track what you're eating, but like, were you hungry when you were playing whatever sport you were playing? If so, we need to get a little bit more food in you.
100%. Yeah, let's definitely make sure we drop those prompts in the show notes. I think let's go analog, right? Like before we
Oh,
add all of this like digital blah blah blah, let's think analog. I think that's such a brilliant and important suggestion and so good for athletes really connecting with themselves. Oh my gosh,
I mean,
absolutely.
I think you just named the journal that we're going to write, the blah, blah, blah.
The blah blah blah.
Yeah. Yeah. Your
I
journal's
love
going to
it.
be all about you. We'll have like tailored boxes that you can like drag and drop that we'll create, but it's called the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Amazing. All right. Well, let's wrap up there. Just a quick little preview. Next week, we have the one, the only Juliet Starrett on the podcast. I cannot stress how excited I am for that one. So definitely make sure you are following, rate, review, subscribe, all of the things. Yeah, find us on social and let us know what you want to hear more of. If you like these episodes where we're just kind of rapping about different topics, and if so, what topics you want us to chat about next. All right, happy training. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning into the Strong Girl Talk podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely head over to wherever you listen to podcasts and rate, review, and of course, subscribe so you never miss another episode. And head over to stronggirlpublishing.com to check out all of the books by Strong Girl Publishing's authors, including Molly Herford, Misha Powell, and so many more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.